Thank you, Tal. I have the privilege today of welcoming you to Jersey City for this kind of important conversation. I'll start by saying from a personal standpoint, being the mayor that day was amongst the most difficult moments of the 11 years that I've been the mayor, not only because of the personal difficulties from managing the city, but it was an eye-opening experience with regards to anti-Semitism and hate. I come from a family of Holocaust survivors. Most of my family died in Auschwitz. Those that survived immigrated to this country because it was a place that they viewed as free of hate, open to opportunity, open to religious opportunity, and the type of place that you want to raise your family. Jersey City prides itself on being the single most diverse city in the country. And when we live here in harmony, it seems so far away from us day in and day out. When you read about mass shootings elsewhere in the country, you say, it could never happen here. We are a community that gets along so beautifully. And then on December 10th, we saw what happened. So it's an important conversation, and I want to just say a thank you to our U.S. Attorney and our Attorney General for joining us today. It is very rare that you get both of them in a room together like this, but I think it speaks to the importance of the conversation that we're having today. So again, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for the panelists, and again, thank you to Tal and the organizers for putting this together. Thank you.
So, yes, okay. Thank you so much, Mayor Fulop, for those powerful remarks. My name is Scott Richmond, and I am proud to serve as ADL's Regional Director for New York and New Jersey. I just want to add one thing to what Tal said. Thank you also, Tal, for your remarks. I just want to add one thing. Yes, it was anti-Semitism that motivated this unfortunate tragedy, but it wasn't just Jews who died. And it's very important to know that it's not just about anti-Semitism. This is about hate. This is about hate that kills everybody. And what may start with the Jews does not end with the Jews, and it's a perfect example of that. As this is the 5th anniversary, we decided to honor this in a special way. We've had a commemoration ceremony here every year, but this year we decided to do something special with a panel discussion with a very esteemed group of panelists. And I want to welcome each of them. Each is really a friend and a partner in the fight against anti-Semitism and all forms of hate. So I will start here. We have New Jersey Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness Director Lori Doran. We have U.S. Attorney General, Attorney General Matt Platkin, U.S. Attorney Philip Selinger, Jersey City Council Member Mira Prince Airy, and Acting Special Agent in charge of the FBI Newark, Nelson Delgado. Now you can clap. So I want to get to today, because obviously we're talking about fighting hate, something that continues. It wasn't just something that happened 5 years ago. But I want to take us back 5 years ago and ask you each to discuss your connection to the shooting and your agency's connection and the role that you or the agency played in the aftermath. I'm going to start with Attorney General Platkin.
Well, thank you, Scott, and thank you to the mayor and to Jersey City for hosting this, and I thank ADL for bringing us together for a really important dialogue around a tragedy. It's hard to believe it's been 5 years. It's hard to believe we're dealing 5 years later with the wave and the epidemic of anti-Semitism and hate that is true in New Jersey, tragically, and as ADL has documented, is also true throughout the United States, indeed throughout the world. 5 years ago, on December 10th, I wasn't the Attorney General. I was then Chief Counsel to Governor Murphy. But he and I were both on the ground here that evening and the following day. And those images are seared into my memory. Images of the shell casings outside of the grocery store and the yeshiva, of the bullet holes through the windows across the street, of the panic on the faces of community members here in Jersey City and from across the state. But there's also another image that is seared into my memory, which was the response. And I'll touch on the great work that our office did in conjunction with the federal partners here. Without that type of state, federal, and local collaboration, we would not have the success that we've had, not only in prosecuting this case, but in bias and hate cases across our state. But there was a response to that tragedy, both by law enforcement, and we should never forget the heroism of Detective Seals, which saved countless lives that evening. And as Scott's point, not just Jewish lives, but as the mayor said, the most diverse city in this country, arguably, in one of, if not the most diverse states in this country, saved countless lives of folks who are part of the Jewish faith and who were simply in and around that store or working there. But the response from the community that night and in the days that followed gave me a lot of hope. And it wasn't just the Jewish community. It was every community standing together to denounce what was one of the most horrific acts of hate in this state's history. And that, in this moment, I hope is a lesson for all of us. I'm looking at Assemblyman Gary Scher, who's been a leader on combating anti-Semitism and hate as a partner with our administration. When we talk about how we can learn from and grow from this tragedy, we have to speak in one voice against what is a rising tide of hate. And we know anti-Semitism is always historically been the tip of that spear. And when that bell gets rung, it is very hard to unring it. When it becomes acceptable to tolerate any form of hate, and too often now anti-Semitism is a form of hate that is tolerated in our society, that is treated as a different kind of hate, then tragedies like this happen. So events like this are so important to see that in New Jersey we speak with one voice, as we did that night. Our shooting response team, the Attorney General's office, was the first team on the scene when the FBI took over the lead in the investigation and did just a phenomenal, I cannot stress how phenomenal of a job our federal partners did and how much work went into tracking down the perpetrators of that shooting. We did as we always do, we coordinate closely. But let's not forget that hopeful moment when, in the face of unspeakable tragedy, a community as diverse as this country itself came together on the scene that night. Leaders of all faiths I saw on the street that night to denounce what had happened there and to make clear our commitment to preventing that type of violence and that type of hate from becoming the norm.
Okay, so you mentioned the partnership between the state and the federal government. We have 3 representatives of the federal government here. Let's start with U.S. Attorney Selinger.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you, ADL, for hosting this event, and thank all of you for coming out tonight. I think what law enforcement learned after 9/11 was that sharing of information among various law enforcement agencies is critical to effectively preventing and responding to any kind of hate, terroristic attacks. And as the Attorney General said, the collaboration generally among law enforcement in New Jersey, federal, state, and local is in my judgment, it's really unparalleled, because the U.S. attorneys and attorney generals in the state generally are New Jersey lawyers who are spent their careers here. But at the federal agencies like the FBI, where acting special acting director Delgado comes from, and all of our other federal law enforcement partners, the FBI, ATF, Secret Service, IRS, those folks generally move around different offices around the country, and they get promoted up, and then they end up in New Jersey, which is one of the great offices. And what I am told by my counterparts across the board is that the collaboration that they see in New Jersey among not just federal law enforcement agencies and the U.S. Attorney's Office, but federal, state, the Attorney General's Office, county prosecutors, and local, is really unparalleled. On the night of the attack here, I was not U.S. Attorney, but we have a rapid deployment team. And our rapid deployment team at the U.S. Attorney's Office immediately marched over with their rapid deployment kits to the FBI Crisis Command Center. And they basically camped out there to write the process that's required to investigate leads to identify perpetrators, others who may be connected, others who may have funded, provided resources, etc., to the perpetrators of the crime. So our attorneys wrote a lot of process, and writing process is search warrants, warrants to identify where cell phones may have been located and have moved. I mean, you see, just given what the shooting that occurred yesterday in New York, the kind of data that becomes available to law enforcement under these circumstances. And our team was writing process to identify who other perpetrators who may have contributed to the attack may have been, and actually identified based on a note that was found on the body of one of the perpetrators. Another location where process was identified, searches were executed, guns and other offenses were committed, and ultimately charges were prosecuted, convictions obtained. Ultimately, it was not connected to what happened here in Jersey City, but the goal was to ensure that that didn't occur. So the joint effort and collaborative effort, I'm saying this because it's really important for the community in New Jersey to know, in my humble judgment, that the coordination that you have among your law enforcement is really unparalleled and is really designed to help keep the community safe.
All right, let's continue the story with Acting Special Agent in Charge Delgado.
Yeah, thank you. I want to thank the ADL, the mayor, and chief for inviting me over to be a part of this memorial service. For us, certainly, I was there, or at least I was here in capacity on the JTTF. I had just arrived to my position as a supervisor of one of the JTTF squads, Joint Terrorism Task Force squads. And when the call came in, I do recall that there was a response, clearly by local law enforcement, immediate response by local for the Jersey City PD and other units that were close by. But boy, there was a larger response throughout the state for everybody to flood the area, quite frankly, unsolicited, but nevertheless, a big response to provide safety to the individuals that were in immediate peril. That led to a lot of confusion, quite frankly, in the beginning stages of the event. We would, as things were unfolding, we would hear about shooters on the roof. We were hearing all kinds of shooters 3 blocks away, and it was all very confusing. And in that fog, you can imagine what you're trying to do is you're trying to establish some element of control and some element of what is reality. And so as the dust starts settling, clearly we have many individuals, many agencies that are involved in understanding the facts, understanding what took place, from the Attorney General's office, who clearly had jurisdiction right out of the gate because of the officers that were involved in the shooting. You have a determination on, well, we understand that Detective Seals was also murdered. Does Jersey City have jurisdiction? Is this, in fact, a hate crime? Is this a domestic terrorist attack? What is this? So at the onset, we're really there to facilitate, we were there to facilitate the ongoing investigation at the local level at the beginning stages. And After probably a period of about 24 hours, we were able to determine that, yes, there was ideology involved from the attacker's perspective, and initially presented that as a hate crimes investigation. And it ultimately wound up as a domestic terrorism investigation. But for us, in those immediate hours, we're concerned, as Mr. Sellinger alluded to, is there a threat to the public beyond that particular attack? And we want to know, are there co-conspirators who are still out there who are planning other attacks, but also trying to flee from their responsibility, their culpability of this particular attack? So we were immediately focused in on those efforts and supporting our state partners and local partners in identifying other threat actors, as well as gathering evidence. We had gathered and reviewed over 1,000 hours of video surveillance. You can imagine the effort that takes, the eyes that have to see and review those videos to determine if there's any opportunity to use that video as evidence. So I'll stop right there to keep it short, but quite an ordeal to try to gather investigative efforts in the beginning stages.
Right. And Director Doran, maybe round out the federal response.
Well, I'm a retired Fed, so at that point, I had just come from working for the U.S. intelligence community to working at OHSP, and was the division director for the Intelligence and Operations Division, which is our law enforcement and analysis bureau. But basically, my predecessor, Jared Maples, who many of you probably know, was here. A lot of our detectives who work on the Joint Terrorism Task Force came along with their federal partners to support and investigate, the same as their FBI colleagues and the state colleagues. So, and our analysts were also the same thing. We're helping to support both the federal and the state in terms of collecting of information and looking at intelligence and helping to determine what did you have here, other than a very sad tragedy? What was the nexus of this? So with that, after the incident occurred, and we had held conference calls, because as you'll probably talk about in a little while, our office coordinates the Interfaith Advisory Council that some of you are probably very well aware of. And so with that, we held multiple conference calls so that we could help to provide, with the governor, I know the Attorney General was on there, U.S. Attorney at the time was there, to help provide the most accurate information to everyone on what exactly happened and then how we could all help each other.
Thank you. And while the state and federal response is critical, incredibly important, at the end of the day, we have the local response, which Mira is going to tell us about.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you to the ADL. Thank you for the panelists for being here today. So on December 10th, I was first-term council person, and we had heard that there was something that was happening. We weren't quite sure what it was, and then suddenly I had seen personally police cars from Kearney, from Philadelphia, from Newark, from Connecticut, from the region coming in here, and that's when we knew that something very big was happening. So I went to the South District where they had one of the command centers, and that was when I saw the immense response and coordination of all of the agencies that are here today, but in particular the work that our police department, our director of public safety, all of the training that they had gone to up until that point had prepared themselves for. I know some of my council colleagues that were there that day will also attest to the fact that the number of phone calls we were getting from parents wanting to know when their children were going to be let out of school, from friends and family that are on the police force wanting to know what we could share, what we knew was going to be okay. And the coordination from the top down was really remarkable. I cannot stress that enough. You can never be prepared for something like this, and as a civilian, certainly could never be prepared for something like this. But the fact that everybody stepped up, the fact that everybody followed chain of command as best they could, the way that information was shared was really, truly remarkable. It got us through a very, very challenging day. And then the question as a council person for me was, how do I support my residents? How do I support, the police force? How do I support our directors? How do we support our educators who are in this very, very tough situation? And that's when the question comes, what do we know and what can we share? Two very different questions, two very important questions in time of crisis, because you want to be able to share enough information to give people some peace of mind, but not so much that you share bad information or share something that will make them even more upset. And that, again, from the communication from the city on down, was really impressive. And I think that while it was a very, very hard time, the fact that people came together, were there for each other. We had people that were going around giving coffee, water, hot chocolate to police officers that were working well into the night and into the early morning. The support that we got from our chaplains program, stepping in and starting to talk to our students and our parents. And again, the work that my council colleagues, we all did, and just sharing this information to make sure that people knew where to go for resources, knew where to go to feel safe.
Thank you all. From ADL's perspective, if we look back, 2019 and this shooting at the kosher supermarket felt like the top of a trend line of increasing anti-Semitism. We had seen anti-Semitism increase from 2013 precipitously each year until 2019. It was 2 years after Charlottesville. It was a year after Tree of Life. And we felt like we had really reached a record number of incidents. Who knew what was to come over the next 5 years, which from ADL's perspective and our audit of anti-Semitic incidents, from 2019 to 2024, anti-Semitic incidents have increased by 5 times across this country, quintuple. That's extraordinary. So with that, I want to focus more on the solution. Each one of your organizations has been active in trying to combat anti-Semitism, to combat hate, and I want to really focus on something constructive. I will start with you, Attorney General Plotkin, and I know that you have your new No Hate in the Garden State initiative, so maybe talk a little bit about that.
Sure. And another great example of federal-state collaboration. I thank the feds who have helped fund this new campaign. So we launched it earlier this year. We're seeing in New Jersey the same trends Scott talked about nationally. We've seen every year for the past several years, we keep breaking a record we don't want to break, which is that we have the most number of bias incidents reported each year for several years running. And that's true certainly for anti-Semitic bias incidents, but it's true for just about every demographic. I think that's important to understand. This epidemic of hate is not sparing any community. So anti-Black bias is up remarkably. Anti-Arab and Muslim bias is up significantly. Anti-Asian bias, anti-Latino, anti-LGBTQ bias. You name the group right now or how people identify, and people are fearful for their safety. And it's juxtaposed against at a time when we are literally at an all-time low in terms of shootings in this state. And that's something we should be proud of. Literally never had lower number of shootings in New Jersey, now for the second year running. But people don't feel safe because of this record level of bias and hate. They don't feel safe going to work. They don't feel safe going to school. They don't feel safe going to worship. They don't feel safe going to a park or a playground. And that's borne out in the numbers. And I say that as someone, and another great example of federal-state collaboration, my own synagogue in Bloomfield was the victim of an attempted arson 2 years ago this coming January, where thanks to our collaboration across federal, state, and local partnerships, again, we prosecuted in record time a bias criminal case charged by the U.S. Attorney's Office. So the No Hate campaign is really geared to do a couple things. First, it's to build awareness, not just of the epidemic of bias and hate, but how we can report it and why reporting is important. So you'll see media and advertisements through all forms, print, digital, television, radio, billboards, nohatenj.gov, geared at building awareness about how to report. And then separately, building capacity through community organizations to reach folks on the ground who candidly might have some, in many cases, legitimate distrust of telling things to law enforcement. And what we want people to understand is reporting is really critical. It's critical for a number of reasons. First, in New Jersey, and we are somewhat unique, if not entirely unique in this case, anywhere you report a bias incident in New Jersey, and bias incidents can be anything from what we're talking about commemorating here to seeing a swastika or slur written on a playground, to a leaflet, or to anything that makes you feel unsafe because of who you are or how you identify. And you can now report in a myriad of different ways. You can report online, bias.njcivilrights.gov. You can report anonymously. You can report in multiple languages. You can tell any law enforcement officer. You can tell our office. Any way you report, it all comes up to the same place. And every morning there is a team, and there's folks from the Division of Criminal Justice and OHS&P and our Division on Civil Rights that review those bias incidents that are reported each day. And we look at them first as, is there a criminal case here? Did somebody commit an act motivated by biased intent? So like take, for instance, an arson. Somebody lit a building on fire. Did they light that building on fire because they had a biased motivation? Then it's not just an arson, then it's a bias crime. And can we, in our Division of Criminal Justice, we have a team dedicated to prosecuting biased crimes, and we've done that, and there have been many cases. But even if it's not a crime, and a lot of these reports are understandably not criminal acts. Either they don't meet the burden that is high, or they don't, we might not know who perpetrated it, or the act in and of itself might not rise to a level of a bias crime. We still look at it as potentially a violation of our civil rights laws. And that's where the coordination across state governmental entities, the Division on Civil Rights, which also sits in my department, enforces the law against discrimination, the oldest and strongest civil rights law in America, predates the Federal Civil Rights Act by a couple of decades. We look at each case as a potential civil rights violation. And we've not hesitated to bring civil rights enforcement actions on the civil side where we need to. But even when it doesn't rise to something that we can enforce, and there are cases where we just simply don't know who did it, we don't have a witness, we don't have the potential evidence to bring a case civilly or criminally. Seeing the trends, which is something ADL does remarkably well, trends are really important because we can understand and identify problems before they escalate. And you can go on our website now, and you can look at Jersey City, you can look at any town in the state, and you can see clearly trends because we publish all the bias report data that we receive on a portal, something we started doing earlier this year. And we try to be as transparent about it as we can so you can understand what's happening in your community, and law enforcement can go on there and see what's happening. And either our law enforcement resources or our civil resources can be used to intercept and disrupt those cycles of bias and hate before they escalate. So the campaign is really geared towards building that trust. People to know that when they report something, we do listen, we do take it seriously, and we respond. And we respond in a number of different ways, again, all geared at keeping us safe. And I want to make one other point, and then I'll pass it over to who's ever next. We also have to understand the role that social media platforms play in this. And this campaign is not directly geared at this, but it's something I talk about a lot. Hate spreads on social media platforms. Most of these cases, in some way, shape, or form, involve hate that has spread on a social media platform. Now, First Amendment and Section 230, for those of you who are familiar with the law, may make it difficult for my office to, unfortunately, regulate a lot of the content on those platforms. But these platforms have terms of service. They have rules that they've put out to attract people to their platforms, many times which say they will not allow hate speech on their platforms. And they routinely ignore them. They routinely ignore them. And this hate that spreads on those platforms doesn't stay on social media. People don't just read this stuff and then forget about it when they go out into the real world. They act on it. And so the other thing that we really need to build awareness of is we need corporate actors to enforce the rules that they are putting in place. And candidly, we might need a change in federal law, but I know that's beyond the scope here, to give us the ability to hold them accountable when they don't. Because that is probably the single biggest place right now where hate is spreading. And it spreads like wildfire. and it permeates people's minds, and they're living in a distorted reality, and then they go and act on it. And we have had, as Scott knows, fights with Facebook, for instance, for well over a year about a single hate group in Ocean County to get one hate group taken down that was openly advocating to kill Jews. And so the campaign is really critical, but using all of the tools at our disposal to disrupt and protect people from bias and hate, the epidemic that we're dealing with, is a top priority of our office. And it's something that until we see those numbers start coming down, until we're not dealing with record levels of bias, until I don't hear from every community in the state about how fearful they are, it will continue to be a top priority.
Thank you. Maybe U.S. Attorney Selinger, maybe tell us a little bit about the United Against Hate program.
Yes, so I'll speak about United Against Hate, but first, let me address one related issue as to what we've done in the wake of incidents such as what happened in Jersey City. One of my first acts as United States Attorney 3 years ago was to create a standalone civil rights division which brings together criminal and civil federal prosecutors whose sole focus is enforcing civil rights, which include prosecuting hate crimes. So we have added a lot of resources to that group, as a result of which we have prosecuted a number of hate crimes, not only against the Jewish community, but against the Muslim community, against the Black community, against other communities. So we have prosecuted, certainly in conjunction with our colleagues at the FBI and also the Attorney General's office, as the Attorney General mentioned, an individual who threw a Molotov cocktail at a synagogue in Bloomfield, an individual who published a manifesto threatening to blow up synagogues across New Jersey. And you may remember that there was an alert across the state which spawned a lot of concern over that. And that has resulted in not only a charge, but a conviction. An individual who in Lakewood carjacked 5 visibly identifiable Orthodox members of the Orthodox community, stabbing one of them in the chest, trying to kill 5 of them, charged and convicted. An individual who vandalized an Islamic center in New Brunswick at Rutgers this year, charged, pled guilty. An individual who threatened to kill white people, a former military officer. So the more cases that are addressed where available through criminal prosecution, it sends a message that there's deterrence and repercussions from these kind of activities. And it's not just actual physical harm, but actual threats can be prosecuted as well, as long as it's specific and credible, and it's an actual threat rather than simply an expression of hate speech, which does have certain protections. So we've been very active in that space. In 2021, the Attorney General for the United States created a United Against Hate program, and my office in New Jersey was one of the lead sponsors of this program, which does many of the similar things that the Attorney General talked about, essentially meeting with community members of disadvantaged groups, of groups that are subject to hate, and bring them together essentially to restore faith and trust in law enforcement, because a lot of marginalized communities have no trust in law enforcement. Typically, the Jewish community is higher on the level of having trust in law enforcement, but other marginalized communities, Muslim community, and other communities have much less trust. And if there's no trust, there's no reporting. And as the Attorney General said, reporting of hate crimes is absolutely critical to effective law enforcement. So we devote a lot of efforts to outreach to all marginalized communities. And we'll talk to them about reporting issues, but also discrimination against religious institutions. And we've brought a number of cases where houses of worship were prohibited from construction, temples, mosques, and houses of worship in other religions based on discriminatory zoning laws. So that too is an indicia of discrimination that we feel is very important to protect against. Those are civil cases rather than criminal cases.
Thank you. SAC Delgado?
Yeah, thank you. I think Mr. Blacken and Mr. Selinger are being fairly humble about the programs that and the campaigns that they're running. If I'm not mistaken, Mr. Selinger's program is being modeled because it was one of the, if not the first, programs that set that way. I would say to you, our responsibility is to be a part of both of those programs and be the best partner we can be to ensure the safety of the community, and that's every community. As Attorney General mentioned, it is the Black community who, in this state, who sees the most, who's reported the most bias-based crimes. Then it's the Jewish community. But our responsibility in the FBI is to protect and serve all communities. And reporting, as mentioned, is an important matter. I'm not sure if many people are aware of this, but even during this event, the shooting 5 years ago here in Jersey City, the two actors, bad actors here, committed a previous shooting weeks prior. And that wasn't reported, and that was to an Orthodox community in which there was, no one was hurt, but there were shots fired at that community. No one reported that incident. No one reported that incident. And it wasn't until after our investigation concluded that we were, during the course of our investigation, that we found that out, went back to that temple, and were asked for the rabbi's assistance there, and ultimately had individuals report what occurred. I'm not saying the act itself would have been prevented, but you can see the importance or how that might have been an important piece of reporting prior to an incident like this occurring. I'll leave you with this thought as well. As we talk about social media, we talk about the spread of hate propaganda, that is permeating across all of our community, but particularly to our youth. I see a number of young people over on the side here, and I'm happy to see them here absorbing and taking in something different and other than what's on their phones. So I commend you guys for being here. But what we've seen over the course of the last 4 or 5 years is this growing trend in crimes and investigation. Our average subject used in a domestic terrorism investigation used to be 29 years old. The median age of our subjects now is 19. 19. We have individuals that are subjects of our investigation that are as young as 12 years old. 12, looking to acquire information on how to build bombs, how to conduct an attack, how to conduct mass shootings. So this is the responsibility that we bear every day to protect the community, because an individual that knows how to do this is a threat, or could be a threat, but an individual who knows how to protect this is someone we want on our team. So that reporting, that campaign to be a part of protecting our youth needs to not be just the responsibility of members of government. It needs to be spread across all of our community. The same way mothers became upset when drunk driving became an incident, mad. That is the same type of campaign I'm suggesting needs to occur in order to lower the temperature in our communities in bias-based incidents.
Thank you. Director Doran?
Sure. As mentioned by both the U.S. Attorney and the Attorney General and the acting SAC, we're heavily engaged with all of their offices with regard to helping with bias and hate. Our office, we do work a lot on terrorism, counterintelligence, but with regard to terrorism, domestic and international, the bias part of it also comes in there. We, as AG Placken mentioned, we have people who talk to his office every day, trying to determine whether or not an act that has happened is, which way will it fall with regard on the legal spectrum. One of the things that we do specifically, again, and also working with our federal partners, is with the Interfaith Advisory Council, which is something that's coordinated out of our office. We have approximately 4,000 members right now throughout the state of New Jersey from all different faiths. It's established in 2012. And basically what that is a forum for everyone from any faith to get together to share information, for our partners here and others to provide information, training. We do a lot talking about providing grants to help houses of worship become safer. And also, as A.G. Platt and I have had this discussion before, it's one thing to strengthen a building, it's another to make someone feel safe. And that's one of the ways that we hope that we can do that. And also with providing training. I'm happy to report that in the last few years, both on the state and on the federal side, the amount of grant funding that is available has incrementally increased. And I think last year, I think we awarded probably close to $37 million worth of money of federal and state grant funding with regard to, houses of worship or nonprofit. And with that, again, we provide a lot of training to help people feel safe, anything ranging from active shooter, but also just in terms of just learning the signs of terrorism. And also we very much, and this is where the governor is my boss, and I don't want to get fired, I have to say the mantra of the See Something, Say Something campaign, because that goes across all different types of activity. I mean, you saw on the highway right now probably about, it's the holidays right now, so please see something, say something. And it's very important, because without that, I mean, we and our colleagues can, the public is the first line of defense. We do our very best to be there, but we can't be there everywhere. So by having people report, no matter how small, you might have one piece of the puzzle, and you might think it's just a little thing, but if something feels weird, report it. There's, out of all of our offices, there are various mechanisms to report that information. Of course, me speaking right now, I'm going to give my own office, which is 1-866-4-SAFE-NJ. We have a counterterrorism watch center. We have people there 24/7, and they will take your information. And with that, it goes directly to the FBI. They will get first bite at the apple to determine whether it meets the federal criteria, for whatever we're looking at on that particular topic. And if not, it comes back to our office and then our state partners, and we'll work with local. Everything is investigated, one way or the other. We close it out.
Thank you. We're going to move to the last part of our program, and I want to ask Councilwoman Prince Airy to close us out. And I want to shift the parameters a little bit and ask you to say something particularly hopeful. You live in a very diverse community, and tell us how you foster unity in this community as a way to fight hate, of course.
So I think what is really great about Jersey City is that we have an opportunity to learn from each other. And I think that regardless of your title or whatever it is you do, you're always a neighbor and you're always a friend first. And so oftentimes the best way to get to know somebody are the small overtures, right? So it's reaching out to a neighbor, checking in on somebody. In the days after the shooting at the Kosher Deli, there was remarkable organization with our interfaith community, a lot of private meetings and dinners, not to be exclusive, but to have small groups that could really sit down and share with each other. And it's those small things, again, I go back to that are really important. In Jersey City, we are lauded and we are very, proud of the fact that we are very diverse. But with that diversity comes a lot of work. You have to have a lot of patience and you have to have a lot of understanding. And I think that in times that are especially trying, when you lead with patience, when you understand that saying a little less is often much, much more, that's always the best way to lead. But the most important thing is just check in on each other. Let people know that you're thinking about them.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all the panelists for a very interesting, rich, meaningful, and powerful conversation. Questions? I don't know that we have time for questions. Brandy? No. Okay. Sorry, okay. But I'm sure the panelists will be available to you afterwards. I'll be available to you afterwards if you'd like. And now I'm turning it over to Brandy Katz-Rubin, my deputy director.
Thank you again to all of the panelists and for all of the vital work that you do every day in the agencies that you lead to protect the people of New Jersey. So thank you. And thank you also to our partners in planning this gathering today, the IAC and Federation Northern New Jersey. I would like to call up, please, Sach Sar, who's Deputy Consul General from the Consul General of Israel, who is going to read the names of the people who left us as a result of this horrible, horrific event. I would also like to ask, I see a lot of electeds here and law enforcement from Jersey City, and I'd like to invite them up to please light memorial candles for each of the 5 people who died. So please come up, Sach, and please come up. I see different council people. I see different people that I'd like to invite up to please light memorial candles.
I'd just like to say that as we opened with Tal mentioning October 7th, which has definitely triggered a great and unprecedented wave of anti-Semitism, but also other hate crimes, it is just symbolic that a representative of the State of Israel is reading the names of the victims here, which shows a direct line between anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism. And let's not forget that victims of October 7th are Jews, non-Jews, Israelis and non-Israelis, and people from different races. Let's not forget that. I will now read the names of the victims. Michael Romberger, he was shot 3 days earlier. Detective Joseph Seals. Douglas Miguel Rodriguez. Mindy Ferenc. Moshe Deutsch. I invite you to light the candles.
There you go.
May their memory be blessed.
Thank you. I would like to now call up, please, Rabbi Levitin and Rabbi Shapiro for a short Mishnah reading, followed by Kaddish.
Mishnah, is a record of the oral tradition that was given at Mount Sinai, along with the written Torah. It was written and recorded about 1,800 years ago. The connection between Mishnah and a departed soul is the Mishnah is the same letters as Neshama, which means a soul. And therefore, it's customary to learn and study a Mishnah in honor of the departed souls. This Mishnah is from Pirkei Avot. Hillel Omer, Havei mitamidav shel Aaron, Ohev Shalom, v'rodev Shalom, Ohev et abriot u'mekarvan la Torah. Translation, Hillel says, be of the disciples of Aaron. Love peace and pursue peace. It's not enough to love it, but you have to work for it. You have to pursue it. Love people and bring them closer to Torah. It doesn't say bring the Torah closer to people. It says bring people closer to the Torah. Don't dilute the values and the morals of the Torah. Bring people closer to the values and the morals of the Torah.
I'm going to do a Kaddish in a moment. I'm just going to share very briefly when I see the candles up here, who's smiling. This month, the end of this month, is the great holiday of Hanukkah. And we just began this Hebrew month 5 days ago. Today is the 5th day of Kislev. But anyone that celebrates this holiday, all month we're already planning and thinking of this great holiday. But if you think about it for a moment, Hanukkah is the last 25th day of the month of Kislev. It's in another 3 weeks. And it goes on for 2 or 3 days in the next month. But the next month we don't talk about Hanukkah. Why not? And the answer is because the moment we have an opportunity to talk about light and to talk about bringing in goodness and godliness, we get right away involved. And that is our answer, the only reason why we are still here as Jewish people. After having so many tragedies, so many people looking to put out our light forever. What happened here 5 years ago, many people were here, we were here, but just last week, a colleague of ours, a young Chabad rabbi in the safest city in the world, United Arab Emirates in Abu Dhabi, was killed by thugs who thought, let's kill another Jew. The response, what do we do as Jewish people? Bring more light, bring more positivity, reach out to somebody else who you would not normally reach out to, do another mitzvah. That is our response. What did they announce a few days ago at the Chabad conference of thousands of Chabad rabbis? They killed one Chabad rabbi. 50 new rabbis are going to go out this year in his memory. Each one of us here, 5 years later, what can we do? Go home, talk to your family, give a little bit more charity, bring a little bit more light and goodness to the world. Eventually, we will tip the scale of good versus evil, and we'll merit to see much greater days for our people. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Closing out our panel this evening and our program this evening is Federation Northern New Jersey CEO Jason Shamus. And I do also just want to acknowledge all the students who are here today. Thank you so much for coming. It really is a bright light to see your faces here. Jason Shamus.
Thank you, and I want to thank our partners at the ADL and the IAC for putting this together. As I was listening to the panel, I was reliving my own memories of those horrible days from 5 years ago. And one of the things that we sort of touched upon, but I want to expand upon a little bit, is the gratitude that the Jewish community owes to law enforcement and our elected officials for that day. Regardless, yeah, you can clap. Regardless of what law enforcement agency or level, the response and support was incredible. From the city of Jersey City, it was Police Commissioner Kelly, I believe, and we did not mention Gerbier's role in this. And so I want to thank the Attorney General's office for what it did. It convened a meeting at the request of Federation that included Congressman Josh Gottheimer, Albie Osiris, and Donald Payne of blessed memory. And together we walked to the store and we walked to the yeshiva, and then we paid a shiva call for Mindy Ferencz on her son's 10th birthday. And if that doesn't leave an lasting, indelible mark in who we are and the power of who we are, nothing will. And we remember that 2 other people were killed that day. A member of law enforcement was killed at a cemetery some 2 miles from here and probably prevented an even greater tragedy in that loss. And so we thank him and his family for their incredible sacrifice to the people of the state of New Jersey and on behalf of the Jewish people. And of course, we lost somebody from the Latin community who by chance was working in that supermarket trying to make a better life for themselves in this incredibly diverse and Jewish community. And so the Jewish Federation was very proud at that time and remains very proud to have been able to bring partners together from the community. And even as I look upon this room, this represents the city of Jersey City so beautifully. And I would be remiss if I didn't harbor on the point that from that comes strength and power to us all. And so I thank you for doing this. I thank you all for being here. And may we have better times ahead. Thank you and good night.